Hi there. I'm so sorry. We had all kinds of technical glitches in the last one, so I'm really sorry about that. We didn't get to see the end of Louisa's great chocolate demonstration. I can tell you the result though, because she texted me to tell me to tell you what the result was, and apparently a whisper is the chocolate bar to go for. If you are going to go and build a bridge out of chocolate, apparently a whisper is the one to use. Although I would go for, who remembers a Texan? Do you remember in the 1980s we used to have Texans and they had that sort of caramel in, and you were guaranteed always to break your tooth on a Texan? I'm sure that would be the one. But anyway, thank you, Louise. Thank you. Louise works for Network Rail. And so I'm very happy that Network Rail are doing lots of research about chocolate bridges. That's great. Just looking at my Twitter feed. If you want to follow me on Twitter, by the way, at Dallas Campbell. Thank you. Sharon Williams has tweeted me to say, kids had a great time with the STEM session with chocolate bars. I found out dairy milk stronger than Galaxy. Controversial. Who else do I have to say hello to? Izzy and Josh in Stockport. Hi, Izzy and Josh in Stockport. Thank you very much for joining us again. Hope you're still here. Right, from chocolate bridges to rockets now, something completely different. Later on this afternoon, we're going to be talking about how to make better videos. We're going to be talking about explosions. But right now, we are going to be talking about rockets of the past, of the future, of the present, all kinds of rockets. And we're delighted today to have Jo Richardson with us from Space Detectives. Jo, are you there with your rocket?
I am here, yes, with my rockets. I am indeed.
Good. And I think after your little presentation, people are going to fire some fiendish rocket-based questions at you. So are you ready for those?
I'm ready for any questions on rockets and space. Yeah, that would be so cool.
I've got to say, it's a big sort of time. There's all kinds of interesting things in the world of rockets at the moment, which hopefully you're going to talk about. All this new SpaceX stuff and what have you. It's all an exciting time for rockets, I would say.
It is a very exciting time for rockets. Yeah, with plans to go back to the moon, plans to eventually.
That's where I want to go. I want to go back
some super cool, fast, and very big.
Oh, no, you're frozen. Oh, come on. Please don't freeze on me, Jo.
I'm still here.
Oh, you're still there? Okay, maybe it was me that's frozen. Okay, I'm going to let you get on with it. Good luck. Hopefully the tech will be okay, and we'll see you in 25 minutes or so for some questions.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, I look forward to having everyone's questions all about rockets and space. That would be fantastic. Okay, so hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Space Detectives HQ, as you can see behind me. I'm based down in Somerset, and I actually have such a cool job. I teach space for a job. How cool is that? So I spend all of my time going around in and out of schools in normal situations and teaching children with a variety of different means, including virtual reality and lots of science activities to get involved with. That's only one half of my job. I also work for the European Space Education Office, which is linked to the European Space Agency and the UK Space Agency. And what is really cool is that the rocket that I'm going to be using today comes from their freely available resources. So let us get on and let's have a little look at a super cool rocket to start with. So what better way to start in looking at rockets but actually look at Tim Peake's rocket. Here is the Soyuz rocket, which Tim Peake blasted off to the International Space Station in 2015. Now, if we look at the Soyuz rocket, you can see it's actually a relatively small rocket in rocket terms, and Tim Peake would have actually been sitting right at the very top of this rocket, with the rest of the rocket being a mixture of liquid and solid fuel. Now, the Soyuz rocket is actually a three-stage rocket, which basically means that when you've used up the fuel in one part of it, we get rid of it because it comes a little bit like dead weight. So if we watch this rocket launch, off it went. As I say, 15th of December 2015, Tim Peake strapped in the seat at the top with his fellow astronaut colleagues, and off it went from the launch pad. And actually, to get in space in this rocket takes roughly about 8.5 minutes to get into low Earth orbit. and then we have to accelerate that rocket to about 17,500 miles an hour in order to catch up with the space station. So it's such a cool rocket to start with, and obviously very relevant because Tim Peake, we all know him as a fantastic British astronaut. So what is our mission for the next sort of 25 minutes or so? Well, first of all, we're going to have a little look at where rockets came from and how did they start? Have we always been using them to go into space, or did they have a more humble beginning? We're going to have a little look at how rockets work, and in that we're going to touch in with some super cool scientists. And we're going to have a look at how we use them and how we can use them going forward. What are we going to, where are we going to go, should I say, in space on our rockets? And then last but not least, and this is the fun, cool bit, is that you're going to build a rocket, hopefully, and then learn how to incorporate the science and launch it. So that's our mission for this morning. So let's have a little look. Here is my taster for what is about to come. So this is the rocket that we're going to make, the European Space Agency's SRO UK rocket. It's going to be made out of paper, and then we are going to do this to launch it. Okay, so that was taken a few days ago in my garden. So that's a little bit fun, and it causes a huge explosion in terms of launching our rocket really, really quite far into the air. So rockets actually had a very humble beginning. The first documented rockets that we know of were developed by the Chinese. And initially they used them as ways of entertainment, a little bit like what we do when we go to a bonfire party on the 5th of November. The Chinese developed rockets insofar that they had these hollow tubes, and they learned that if they stuffed gunpowder into the hollow tube and then struck it with a match, it would actually ignite the gunpowder and propel that rocket forward. Now, in the days, in about 1232 is the first documented time when we started to see rockets being used. And the Chinese would have used them first, as I say, as a form of entertainment, but then a more sinister use came into practice. In the days of Chinese emperors, where there was lots and lots of disputes over land, they soon found out that they could reuse these rockets as a form of weaponry. And if you look up on my screen here, you can actually see that we went from having a rocket on a bamboo shoot to a rocket on a bamboo shoot with additional little parts to it. So obviously this part here, the little pointy bit at the top of the rocket, was really important because that made the rocket more aerodynamic, and it could actually fly further and much faster. And then similarly, we also had the fins that they placed on the bottom of the bamboo stick, which made their rocket much more controllable. It wasn't quite as wieldy, and it would fly much straighter. So the Chinese first documented use of rockets, and they were used as entertainment, but then later as weapons. Now, as with rocket engineering, even of today, rockets are really hard to get into space. And there's lots and lots of disasters with rockets before we actually have successes. This is a video here showing you of some super rocket disasters. But actually, rocket engineers and scientists actually learn from these events. They learn what not to do, and they learn to try and make things better and make things work. So we sometimes need to have these sorts of experiences in order to make better rockets go further and faster. So super cool rockets that actually weren't quite so super cool. So how do rockets work? Well, this is your chance right now to get involved with a little bit of simple science. So rockets work by burning the gas, burning the fuel, and then producing the gas out of the bottom of the rocket. And this can be related to a super cool scientist. Sir Isaac Newton had lots and lots of ideas on exactly how gravity worked and how the forces of gravity interacted with one another. And if we look at some of Sir Isaac Newton's work and we look at his third law of motion, it beautifully explains how rockets work. Let me show you a little example of what you can do yourselves today, wherever you're learning from, whether you're in a key worker school or whether you're at home with your parents. So you need to get a balloon, okay? A long, thin balloon is the best, okay? But any balloon will do. And what we're going to do with our balloon is we're going to imagine that it's a rocket, and we're going to put some fuel, obviously not rocket fuel, we're going to put some air into our rocket balloon. Without bursting it, We're going to take it off the balloon pump there, and now we've got our fuel in our rocket balloon. Now the trouble is with a rocket balloon, it has a very thin little nozzle at the bottom of the balloon. And when I let go of this rocket balloon, all of the air, all of that fuel is going to want to come out really fast. It's going to want to shoot out the bottom of my balloon rocket. Just a little bit like when we light or mix the gases inside a real rocket, all the gas wants to escape out of the engines at the bottom really fast. And what happens there is that creates a force. And Isaac Newton said in his third law of motion that actually if you create an action one way, you'll get the same reaction in the opposite way, okay, which beautifully explains how rockets work. So we're going to test Isaac Newton's idea. We're going to test whether his theory of his third law of motion actually works. So we'll watch the air coming out of the rocket. Hopefully it's going to push on the floor somewhere down by where my feet are and push my rocket in the opposite direction. Let's give it a go. So if you're having a go at home or you want to have a go a little bit later, we always need a countdown for a rocket. No rocket launch is complete without a countdown. So we're going to go from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blast off. Where did it go? It went up. But actually, what really happened with my balloon rocket, and might happen with yours as well, is that it actually went up in a bit of a wonky line, which is a bit bad if you're designing real rockets. You don't want that to happen with real rockets. So the problem is with a balloon rocket, it has one feature which is really important in a real rocket, and that is the fins on the bottom. So like in my picture here, we've got fins. My balloon rocket needs fins because that will give us an ability to make our rocket go straight. So when you're designing your rocket a little bit later, make sure you pay particular attention to the fins and the design of those fins. So let's have a little look. How do we use rockets? How do we use them? What do we use them for today? Well, we use them obviously in lots and lots of space exploration. So whether that's sending robots to Mars or whether that's sending people to the International Space Station. That's what we're currently doing in space. We're doing robotic missions to faraway planets and sending humans and astronauts to the space station. And on my picture here, we've got a picture of an astronaut sitting in a rocket just about to launch from the launch pad. And why I've shown you this is because to show you how small rockets really are inside. You can see he's really quite cramped and his knees are up in front of him and he's actually lying down. So can you imagine being an astronaut sitting in this position, launching off the launch pad at 17,500 miles an hour? Pretty scary. I think you've got to be made of really tough stuff to be an astronaut. Let's have a little look at where this astronaut may well have been traveling to. So here is the International Space Station, a really, really cool piece of engineering orbiting the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour. Now, you might be surprised to find that the actual International Space Station is not that far away. It's only about 250 miles up from the Earth's surface. Lots of people, even adults who I teach, you'd be surprised. They often think it's actually nearer to the moon, but it isn't. It is quite close. And in terms of size, it's about the size of a football field. Okay, so again, not that big. It's not a huge, huge structure. You can see, looking at the ISS there, that it's actually largely powered by these huge, great big solar panels that are stuck on the side. And obviously they gather the sun's energy and create the movement of the space station as it orbits the Earth. Inside the space station, what do they do? I often get asked this question. What do astronauts actually do when they're on the International Space Station? Well, they're doing loads and loads of science, and most of the science that they do on the space station directly helps us with engineering and medicine and such things like that here on Earth. So it's very important that the science on the space station goes ahead. It's really helpful to us here on Earth. I know what everyone is thinking is, how do you actually live on the space station? I get asked this a lot. So on the space station, there's 6 bedrooms. At the moment on the space station, we've only got 3 astronauts up there at the moment. And obviously they will be sharing those bedrooms, 6 bedrooms, but they're not bedrooms like you or I have. These are really small telephone box sized bedrooms, and astronauts actually sleep hooked on to the wall. They don't have nice comfy beds and fluffy rugs in their rooms. So it's quite a stark way of living, and most astronauts actually spend about 6 months on one mission, but we've had astronauts that have spent longer, up to 12 months on the space station. So it's a really cool piece of science up orbiting in space. Let's have a little look at how Tim arrived when he got to the space station. Now, I love this picture. It's one of my favourite pictures of Tim Peake. There he is coming through the hatch of the space station, and he's smiling. And I think he's smiling for two reasons. I think the main reason that he's made it safely in the launch of the Soyuz rocket, but also he actually managed to dock safely, because on the Soyuz capsule to the International Space Station, there was a bit of a problem and they had to do it manually. So I think it's a smile of relief. But as you can see, as he comes through the hatch of the ISS, he's not walking on board, he's actually floating in. So this is, as soon as International Space Station astronauts get there, they actually literally float in space. And it's all to do with the microgravity that exists on the space station. So lots of people think there's no gravity in the space station, but actually there is. There's a very tiny amount of gravity, but it basically means that the astronauts are literally free falling as the ISS orbits the Earth. So he looks really relieved at getting there safely. Now, I'm going to show you an experiment that Tim Peake actually did when he was on board the International Space Station, and I love it because what it proves is that how amazing the human body is at adapting to the environment of being in space. So Tim Peake actually did an experiment to test to see if he could make himself feel dizzy. Let's have a watch. So here he was. Tim Coper, who's a gentleman that's upside down, hanging from the ceiling, was trying to spin Tim to make him feel dizzy. Now, if you did this here on Earth, oh my goodness, you'd probably feel really unwell after a few goes at doing this. But eventually, Tim actually was spinning really, really quite fast. He kept asking Tim Coper to spin him faster. And as you can see, off he went. And as he came to a standstill, he was a bit giddy, but actually it didn't last very long, and he certainly didn't feel unwell. So it's amazing how the human body adapts to being in space. Now, for the last sort of part of my session, I want to have a look at some rockets that have gone before, some very famous rockets that we sometimes forget about, but they are really important in terms of space exploration. So this rocket here is called the Space Shuttle. There it is. And as you can see, it's slightly different than normal rockets. The normal rockets that you see are long and thin, but this particular rocket has these amazing, what we call delta wings. So it's more like an aeroplane. It's like an aeroplane stuck onto a huge, great big orange fuel tank. And although the Space Shuttle was an amazing piece of engineering, it didn't really have a very good safety record. And we did actually, unfortunately, lose a couple of crews on board the Space Shuttle. But it was important, because did you know that the Space Shuttle single-handedly, with the help of the astronauts doing spacewalks, helped to piece together what we see today as the International Space Station. So a lot of the pieces, a lot of the modular pieces for the ISS were taken up in the rear, in the cargo bay of the space station, of the Space Shuttle, and put together robotically with the help of astronauts in space. How cool is that? So that's the Space Shuttle. And one rocket that we cannot forget is this rocket. This is an amazing piece of engineering. This is what we call the Saturn V. The V means 5, and it doesn't mean that this rocket went to Saturn, but the Saturn V is still the biggest, fastest, and most powerful rocket that we have ever made. And if you think about that for a minute, the last time that this rocket actually flew is nearly 50 years ago. Why is it so famous? Why is it so cool? Why do I love it so much? Is because it took men to the moon. And this is one of those men. This is Buzz Aldrin, a lovely picture of Buzz Aldrin here on the moon. And if you look really carefully in the visor, you can see another astronaut in the reflection, and that is actually Neil Armstrong. And Neil Armstrong took this picture of Buzz on the moon in 1969. So incredible piece of engineering is the Saturn V. Now, as I promised you, we are going to look at some super cool rockets of the future. And this is just one of them. There's many more, but this is the one that I really like at the moment. This is what we call the SpaceX Falcon Heavy. And if you look at my picture, you can see in the background, we've got a different planet. This isn't the moon, this is indeed Mars. And the idea is that the SpaceX rockets will eventually take humans at some point in our future to Mars. Now, this rocket is super fast, super incredible, and it is a little bit more like what you'd expect a rocket to look like. But what is really fantastic about this, we use it, which makes it really much more affordable to go into space. And I'm going to show you, first of all, this rocket launching. So here we are. This was a test flight that the Falcon Heavy did a few years ago. And what was so amazing is that the gentleman who actually organised this test flight put his car, his own super sports car, in the top of the rocket to give it a little bit of weight, but also to see if this rocket would work successfully. And you can see the camera taking that shot there, actually vibrating with the amazing power of this rocket. And off it went. And if you draw your eyes to this dial up here in the right hand side of the screen, you can see how incredibly fast this rocket accelerates. Amazing science and engineering going on there. But what's so cool about this, as I said to you, is that you can totally reuse it. Let me show you how. So keep your eyes on the top left of the screen. And even today, even to me, this is something like out of science fiction. How cool is that? Both of the booster rockets coming down in a vertical position and landing successfully. Just think of the amazing engineering and science that's gone into developing those two rockets there. Okay, so amazing, and it is one to watch. Hopefully, in your lifetime, in certainly in the children's lifetime, it may well be that they will see people blasting off into space on board one of those rockets on their way to Mars. Okay, so make space rockets as we leave this session here this morning. I want you to have a look at my website, which is there in the middle of the screen. Download the rocket stencil, which, as I said to you, is a European space education stencil. So super cool. You can use it for free. And if you want to know how to put it together and most importantly launch it, take a look at the YouTube video, which is listed at the top of the screen there. And I think it will also be in the comments as well. And what would be really, really cool, if you could upload your rocket pictures, just the pictures of the rockets, to see how well you've done. That would be fantastic as well. You can do that to Space Detectives, or come back to the National STEM Centre and do it on their Facebook page as well. Okay, so that's really cool. I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of an insight into rockets past, present and future. And remember, it's really important to learn all about science, technology, engineering and maths, but you can do it having super cool fun using space to do so. Okay, so thank you very much.